Evans slammed his palm into the nearest wall. Drywall crumbled. A metal supply cart rattled and toppled, instruments clanging across the floor. Patients screamed. A child cried. Nurses scattered, instinct battling training. This wasn't a drill. This was a giant attacking the ER, and no one knew what he'd do next. Caleb Finch, the intern, froze behind a nurse's station. He'd memorized protocols, watched simulations, practiced calm, but none of that prepared him for a man who seemed too big for the room. Evan's eyes were wild, unfocused, darting as if every sound was a threat. The monitors around him spiked and wailed, echoing the panic everyone felt. "This is a violent patient ER situation," Dr. Lila Moreno whispered, backing away, hands raised. Security rushed in. 2 guards, brave but outmatched. They tried to flank Evan, speaking softly, gesturing toward a bed. Evan turned, towering over them, and for a moment no one moved. Fear is contagious. It spread like smoke. Then Evan roared, a raw sound that shook the hallway, and the guards stopped cold. One misstep here could be fatal. The ER held its breath. Sirens grew louder outside. "Police are here," someone said, relief and dread mixing in their voice. Officers Grant Keller and Dana Ruiz entered with practiced calm, weapons low, eyes scanning. A hospital is a terrible place for force. Too many lives, too many corners. Keller raised his hands, voice steady. "Evan, we're here to help you." Evan laughed, sharp, broken, full of pain. "Help?" He kicked a cart aside. It skidded across the floor and slammed into a door. Nurses gasped. Doctors retreated. The words "hospital fight" rippled through the room without being spoken. Ruiz leaned in, whispering, "We can't use tasers in here." Keller nodded. He knew. This was a powder keg. Dr. Pierce tried again, shouting orders. Clear the hall, secure patients, get meds ready, but nothing stuck. Fear jammed the system. Authority faltered. Even the police hesitated. This emergency room incident was slipping out of everyone's hands. And then, quietly, almost invisibly, someone stepped forward. Mara Hale. The moment the 7-foot giant charged the ER, every sound died at once. Monitors froze mid-beep. Doctors stopped breathing, and a gurney slammed sideways as nurses scattered. He was bleeding, towering, shaking with rage, a giant attacking the ER, screaming words no one could understand. 2 security guards tried to block him. He sent them sliding across the floor like toys. Police rushed in, weapons raised, but no one fired. Not in a hospital. Not with patients everywhere. Then something unbelievable happened. From behind a supply cart, a rookie nurse stepped forward. No panic, no shouting, just calm eyes and steady hands. Doctors whispered, "Get her out of there." Police yelled, "Ma'am, move back." She didn't, because in the next few seconds, the entire ER would watch a giant versus nurse moment that no one would ever forget. The emergency room had handled chaos before, but that night felt different, like the air itself had tightened. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead as stretchers lined the hallway. Monitors chimed in steady rhythms, and the smell of antiseptic clung to everything. It was controlled, it was predictable, until the doors burst open. The 7-foot giant didn't walk into the ER, he charged it. Automatic doors snapped back against their frames as Evan Cross stumbled through, towering over everyone in sight. Blood soaked his jacket, streaking down his side, but pain wasn't slowing him. Rage was driving every step. Conversations died mid-sentence. A gurney skidded sideways as someone scrambled out of his path. In a heartbeat, the ER tipped from routine into full-blown ER chaos. "Lock it down," Dr. Nolan Pierce shouted, his voice cracking through the noise. But lockdowns require control, and control had just evaporated. The rookie nurse hadn't been there long enough to have a reputation. New badge, new shoes, calm eyes. She moved from behind a supply cart, posture steady, voice low, no shouting, no panic, just focus. "Mara, get back!" someone hissed. She didn't. As the giant versus nurse distance closed, the room watched. Shocked doctors, police tense. Breath held. No one knew it yet, but the balance of power was about to shift, and for the first time since the doors flew open, the ER wasn't running on fear. It was waiting. Officer Grant Keller took one slow step forward, palms open, voice calm enough to cut through the noise. He'd talked down armed suspects, desperate men, people on the edge, but none of them had filled a room the way Evan Cross did. "Evan," Keller said, keeping the name steady, "look at me. You're bleeding. You need help." For a split second, Evan's eyes flickered. Confusion, maybe pain, then hardened again. He shook his head violently, like he was trying to knock something loose inside his skull. "Don't touch me!" Evan bellowed. The sound slammed into the walls. A heart monitor shrieked as a patient's vitals spiked. A nurse dropped a tray, the crash echoing through the hallway. This wasn't just a hospital fight waiting to happen. This was a collapse of control. Officer Dana Ruiz circled left, careful, calculating. Her hand hovered near her radio, not her weapon. In a hospital, every option was bad. "We can't rush him," she muttered, "and we can't let him move deeper into the ER." Behind them, Dr. Nolan Pierce watched his department unravel. Beds had been pushed back, curtains torn aside, patients huddled wherever they could fit. The ER chaos had reached a point no protocol covered. "Security, fall back," Pierce ordered. "Everyone else keep distance." But Evan didn't respect distance. He staggered forward, one massive step at a time, leaving a dark smear of blood on the tile. Pain twisted his face now, fighting with fury. He clutched his side, breathing hard, but his size made every movement threatening. A 7-foot giant, wounded and cornered, was more dangerous than any weapon. Keller raised his voice just a notch. "Evan, stay where you are." Evan laughed again, short, bitter. "You think I'm scared of you." He kicked another cart. It flipped, sliding across the floor until it smashed into a wall. The crash sent a ripple of panic through the room. A child screamed. A doctor cursed under his breath. The words "giant attacks ER" felt painfully accurate now. Ruiz whispered, "If he reaches the trauma bay, we lose him." Keller knew she was right, but drawing a weapon here could turn an emergency room incident into a catastrophe. "Sir," Keller said, firmer now, "this ends one way or another. Don't make it worse." Evan turned, eyes blazing. He took a step toward Keller, and Keller stepped back. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but the room felt it. Authority had blinked. Doctors exchanged looks. Nurses pressed themselves against walls. Even security stood, frozen. In that moment, everyone realized the same thing. No one in charge had a solution. Except one person. Mara Hale hadn't moved much since stepping forward. She stood near the edge of the chaos, eyes locked on Evan, not with fear, but with attention. She noticed the way he favored his left side, the shallow breaths, the way his anger surged in waves, then dipped into something, almost like confusion. She spoke softly, not to the room, but to him. "Evan," she said. The name cut through the noise like a blade. Evan's head snapped toward her. "What did you say?" "I said your name," Mara replied, calm, grounded. "You don't need to shout. I can hear you." Dr. Moreno's breath caught. "Who is that?" "A rookie," someone whispered. "She's brand new." Keller turned slightly. "Ma'am, I need you to step back." Mara didn't argue. She didn't apologize. She just kept her eyes on Evan. "You're hurt," she continued, "and you're exhausted. You've been fighting longer than you realize." Evan scoffed, but his shoulders sagged just a fraction. "Don't pretend you know me." Mara nodded. "You're right. I don't. But I know pain, and I know when someone's about to." Collapse. Silence spread. Even the monitors seemed quieter. The police watched. The doctors stared. The shocked doctors couldn't believe what they were seeing. Authority had failed. Force had failed. And now a rookie nurse was standing where no one else dared, changing the rules of the fight without throwing a single punch. The ER wasn't under control yet, but for the first time the giant was listening. The silence didn't feel safe. It felt loaded, like the moment just before a storm breaks. Evan Cross stood in the center of the ER, chest rising and falling in uneven bursts, fists clenched at his sides. The anger hadn't left him. It had simply paused, coiled tight, waiting for the smallest spark. Everyone in the room could sense it. One wrong word, one sudden move, and the giant would explode again. Mara Hale took a careful step closer. "Stop," Officer Keller warned quietly. Mara lifted a hand, not to silence him, but to acknowledge the risk. Her eyes never left Evan's. "I'm not here to trap you," she said. "I'm here to keep you standing." Evan sneered. "You think I need you?" "No," Mara replied. "I think you're trying not to fall apart." The words hit harder than any command. Evan's jaw tightened, his breathing stuttered. For a moment, the rage slipped, revealing something raw underneath. Fear, maybe, or shock. Dr. Pierce leaned toward Dr. Moreno. "If she pushes him—" "She knows what she's doing," Moreno whispered, though she wasn't sure why she believed it. Mara noticed the tremor in Evan's left hand, the way his knees locked, then unlocked, like his. Body was fighting gravity. She lowered her voice even more. "Your blood pressure's spiking," she said. "That pain in your side isn't just a cut, it's deeper." Evan shook his head violently. "You're lying!" Mara nodded again. "Then prove me wrong. Take one slow breath." The room collectively held its breath with him. Evan inhaled, too fast, too shallow, then exhaled with a growl. His balance wavered. A nurse gasped. Keller shifted his weight, ready to move, and then it happened. Evan lunged. It wasn't a calculated attack. It was panic. His foot slipped on the blood-slick tile, and his massive frame pitched forward, straight toward Mara. The distance between them vanished in a heartbeat. The giant versus nurse moment everyone feared had arrived. Keller shouted. Someone screamed. But Mara didn't run. She stepped inside Evan's reach, turned her body sideways, and raised her arm, not in fear, but in precision. Her movement was fast, controlled, rehearsed. She hooked his wrist, twisted at the joint, and shifted her weight. The giant roared, more in surprise than pain. Mara pivoted, using his forward momentum against him. The ER floor shook as Evan stumbled, off balance, his strength suddenly working against him. Gasps echoed. Shocked doctors stared, frozen. "This can't be happening," Caleb whispered. Evan tried to recover, muscles tensing, but his injury betrayed him. Pain flashed across his face. His knees buckled. In seconds that felt like hours, the unstoppable force was no longer unstoppable. Mara held firm, voice steady even now. "Don't fight it." With one final, uncontrolled step, Evan collapsed, his weight slamming into the floor, pinned, stunned, breathing hard. The room erupted in noise. Police rushed in, nurses surged forward, orders flew, but beneath it all was disbelief. The 7-foot giant lay on the ER floor, and the rookie nurse was still standing. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The 7-foot giant lay sprawled across the ER floor, chest heaving, eyes wide, not with rage, now, but shock. The sound of his breathing filled the room, loud and uneven. Blood pooled. Beneath him, dark against the white tile. The chaos that had ruled the ER seconds earlier collapsed into stunned silence. Then everything rushed back at once. "Secure him!" Officer Keller shouted. Police surged forward, but they stopped short when Mara raised a hand, not commanding, not dramatic, just enough to pause them. "Give him space," she said calmly. "He's in shock." Dr. Pierce stared at her. "You took him down. How do you know?" "He's crashing," Mara replied, already kneeling beside Evan. "If you rush him now, you'll make it worse." The words landed hard. Authority shifted again. Dr. Moreno moved closer, eyes scanning Evan's color, his breathing, the way his fingers twitched. "She's right," she said quietly. "Blood loss, adrenaline dump. He's fading." The hospital fight everyone expected didn't come. Instead, the ER transformed, fear turning into focus. Nurses rushed in with trauma kits. Someone grabbed oxygen. Monitors were rolled forward, cables snapping into place. The same hands that had been shaking minutes ago now moved, with purpose. Evan groaned, trying to push himself up. Mara placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "Stay down. You're safe." "Don't," he rasped. "Don't touch me." Her grip didn't tighten, but it didn't move either. "I'm not hurting you," she said. "I'm keeping you alive." Evan's strength was gone. The giant who had terrified the ER couldn't even lift his arm. His breathing turned shallow, his eyes glassy. Panic flashed across his face. Not violent now, but human. Keller crouched nearby, voice low. "Ma'am, how did you do that?" Mara didn't look up. "Physics," she said. "And timing." Dr. Pierce blinked. "You're a rookie." Mara finally met his eyes. "I'm a nurse." That was all she said. As restraints were carefully applied, loose, medical, not punitive, Evan didn't fight. He winced as they rolled him onto a gurney, the weight of his body sagging, defeated not by force, but by exhaustion. Caleb watched from behind the desk, heart pounding. He'd seen attendings freeze. He'd seen police hesitate, but he'd never seen someone step into danger with that kind of calm. "Who is she?" he whispered. "No idea," another nurse replied, "but she just saved everyone in this room." The police backed off, weapons holstered. The police in hospital presence softened, replaced by cooperation. Keller nodded to Ruiz. "Let them work." As the gurney rolled toward trauma, Evan turned his head slightly. His eyes found Mara's. "You didn't have to do that," he murmured. "Yes," she said gently, "I did." The doors to the trauma bay closed, sealing the chaos behind them. In the hallway, doctors exchanged stunned looks. Protocols would be reviewed, reports would be written, questions would be asked. But one truth was already clear. The unexpected hero nurse hadn't just stopped a giant attacking the ER. She'd reminded everyone what control really looked like. The trauma bay hummed with controlled urgency. Machines beeped in steady rhythms now, no longer screaming. The chaos had retreated behind closed doors, but the tension lingered, heavy, unresolved. Evan Cross lay strapped to the gurney, oxygen mask fogging with every shallow breath. Under the bright lights, he looked different, smaller somehow. The 7-foot giant who had charged. The ER now seemed fragile, stretched thin by pain and exhaustion. Mara stood at his side, chart in hand, eyes sharp. "BP's dropping," she said. "Heart rate's erratic." Dr. Moreno nodded. "Prep imaging. I want a full scan." As the team worked, Evan's eyes flicked around the room, searching for exits that weren't there. Panic crept back in, not violent, but desperate. "Don't lock me in," he muttered. Mara leaned closer so only he could hear. "No one's locking you in. Stay with me." His gaze snapped to hers. "You don't know what happens when I pass out." That stopped her. "What happens?" she asked. Evan swallowed hard. His massive chest hitched. "I don't wake up calm." The words landed like a warning. Dr. Pierce stepped into the bay, arms crossed. "We need restraints tighter. Police are still. Outside." Mara shook her head immediately. "Not yet." Pierce frowned. "He's a violent patient ER case." "He was," Mara corrected. "Right now he's bleeding internally." Moreno glanced between them. "What makes you so sure?" Mara pointed to the scan lighting up on the screen. "There. Ruptured vessel near the spleen. That pain you ignored? That's what drove the adrenaline. not aggression. Evan let out a shaky breath. I told them I was hurt. They didn't listen. Silence followed. Outside the bay, shocked doctors whispered. Inside, a truth settled in. The giant attacks ER. Headline didn't tell the whole story. Keller appeared at the door. We need a statement. Later, Moreno said. He might not make it to later. The room shifted again. Fear now focused on the patient, not the threat. Mara adjusted the IV, hands steady. Evan, listen to me. If you lose consciousness, your body will crash. You need surgery. Evan laughed weakly. Figures. Do you consent? Moreno asked. Evan hesitated. His eyes flicked to Mara. If I say no, will you stop them? Mara met his gaze. I'll tell you the truth. Saying no could kill you. He closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, something heavy had lifted. Then do it. As consent was logged, Evan's voice dropped. They always think I'm the problem. Mara paused. Why? Because I'm big, he said simply. And because when I'm scared, I don't look like it. The words echoed. A lifetime of being treated like a threat poured into that single sentence. Moreno squeezed Mara's shoulder. Good call out there. Mara didn't smile. She watched Evan as they prepped him for surgery, monitors stabilizing. Under her watch. Outside, police radios crackled. Paperwork waited. But inside the trauma bay, the story had changed. This wasn't just a giant versus nurse showdown anymore. It was a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous thing in an emergency room incident isn't the person losing control. It's everyone else failing to look closer. The surgical doors closed with a heavy thud, sealing Evan Cross inside. Red lights flicked on. The 7-foot giant disappeared behind frosted glass, replaced by a flurry of motion and clipped commands. The ER outside exhaled, but only slightly. What had happened still hung in the air, unsettled and sharp. Mara stood alone for a moment, hands resting on the counter, feeling the adrenaline finally catch up to her. Her fingers trembled now that the danger had passed. No one noticed at first. Everyone was too busy replaying the moment in their heads. The instant a rookie nurse took him down instantly, Officer Keller approached quietly. You didn't have to step in like that. Mara didn't look up. Yes, she said. I did. Keller studied her, then nodded. You could have been hurt. So could everyone else, she replied. Across the room, Dr. Pierce gathered staff for a quick debrief. His voice was firm but strained. We lost control tonight. That can't happen again. A murmur rippled through the group. Eyes drifted, unspoken, to Mara. Pierce noticed. What you did was effective, he admitted. But it wasn't protocol. Mara met his gaze evenly. Neither was letting fear run the room. The words landed harder than intended. Silence followed. Dr. Moreno stepped in. She prevented injuries. She prevented a shooting. That matters. Pierce exhaled slowly. This will be reviewed. Good, Mara said. It should be. Nearby, Caleb Finch replayed the scene again and again. He'd watched police hesitate, security freeze, senior doctors step back. And he'd watched a rookie step forward, not to dominate, but to connect. What did you do to him? Caleb finally asked. Mara glanced at him. I listened, she said. Then I used momentum. That answer didn't satisfy him, but it stuck. A nurse hurried over. Update from surgery. Everyone turned. They stabilized the bleed, the nurse said. He's alive. A wave of relief washed through the ER. Shoulders dropped. Some people smiled. Others looked away, overwhelmed. Mara closed her eyes briefly. Good. Keller's radio crackled. Media's outside. They're already calling it a hospital fight. Mara winced. That's not what it was. No, Keller agreed. But that's what it'll be remembered as. Dr. Moreno shook her head. Unless we tell the whole story. Pierce straightened. We will. But even as he said it, Mara knew how stories worked. Headlines loved giant attacks ER. They loved giant versus nurse. They loved shock, not nuance. Keller hesitated, then spoke softly. For what it's worth, you changed how I see these situations. Mara gave a small nod. That's worth a lot. The surgical doors opened again. Evan was wheeled out, pale, unconscious, lines and tubes tracing the map of survival. The giant looked almost peaceful now. Mara walked alongside the gurney as they transferred him to ICU. As they stopped outside the room, she paused, resting a hand briefly on the rail. "You're not the problem," she whispered, though he couldn't hear it. Behind her, the ER resumed its rhythm. New patients arrived. New crises waited. Life went on, but something had shifted. Because that night drew a clear line between force and care, between fear and control. And everyone in that hospital now knew which side the unexpected hero nurse stood on. By morning, the ER looked normal again. The blood was gone. The carts were upright. The walls stood unbray. But the people who had been there knew better. Mara Hale stood at her locker, tying her hair back, when her phone buzzed, then buzzed again and again. Messages stacked up, alerts, headlines, missed calls. She opened one. 7-foot giant, charged the ER. Rookie nurse took him down instantly. Her stomach tightened. Across the break room, Caleb stared at his screen. "You're everywhere," he said quietly. Mara didn't answer. The video had already spread, grainy security footage clipped at just the right angle. No context, no lead-up, just the moment of impact. The giant versus nurse freeze frame looped again and again, slowed down, zoomed in, dramatized. Outside, news vans lined the curb. Reporters rehearsed serious faces. Social media boiled with hot takes. Hero, reckless, untrained, brave, dangerous. Officer Keller watched it all from the hallway, jaw tight. "They cut everything before he collapsed," he said. "They made it look like a fight." Dr. Moreno shook her head. "That's how stories travel." Dr. Pierce called an emergency meeting. "We're under scrutiny," he said, pacing. "Internal review, external review, legal wants, statements." A hand went up. "Is Mara in trouble?" Pierce stopped pacing. "No, not officially." The word hung there. Mara finally spoke. "If this is about me, say it." Every eye turned. Pierce sighed. "It's about perception, about whether force was necessary." Mara nodded slowly. It was. Silence. "I didn't take him down to win," she continued. "I did it to stop a cascade. Fear was about to hurt someone." "And if you'd miscalculated?" Pierce asked. "Then I'd own that," she replied. "But I didn't." Before anyone could respond, a nurse rushed in. "ICU update on Evan Cross." Mara's head snapped up. "He woke up," the nurse said, "and he's asking for you." The room stilled. Pierce frowned. "That may not be appropriate." Mara didn't hesitate. "It is." In the ICU, Evan looked nothing like the man from the headlines. Pale, weak, tubes tracing, quiet lines across his chest. The 7-foot giant reduced to a patient fighting to stay alive. When he saw Mara, his eyes filled. "They're saying I attacked the ER," he rasped. Mara pulled a chair closer. "They're saying a lot of things." He swallowed. "You could have hurt me." "I could have," she agreed, "but I didn't." He nodded faintly. "You saw me." That was the part no headline captured. Outside the room, Keller watched through the glass. A nurse and a so-called monster, talking like equals, no chaos, no threat, just truth. The world had already decided what the story was. But inside that hospital, the people who mattered most were starting to understand something deeper. The night the giant charged the ER wasn't about violence. It was about what happens when someone finally refuses to look away. The hospital review board convened 3 days later in a windowless conference room that smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Every chair was filled. Administrators, legal counsel, senior physicians. A screen at the front displayed a paused video frame. the exact moment the rookie nurse took him down instantly. Mara sat alone at the end of the table. The clip played again. The 7-foot giant lunged. The pivot, the fall. "Pause there," someone said. The frame froze on impact. "From this angle," legal counsel began, "it appears forceful." Mara kept her hands folded. It was controlled. A board member frowned. "You're saying you intentionally engaged a violent patient ER situation?" "I'm saying I prevented one," Mara replied. A murmur spread. Dr. Pierce cleared his throat. "Nurse Hale, why didn't you retreat when police instructed you to?" Mara met his gaze. "Because retreat would have escalated him." "How?" another voice pressed. "Because he wasn't angry," she said. "He was panicking." Silence followed. Moreno leaned forward. "Explain." Mara inhaled slowly. "Everyone kept treating Evan Cross like a threat to be managed. No one treated him like a patient in pain. His size made his fear look like aggression." One board member scoffed. "He overturned equipment." "Yes," Mara said evenly. "So do people drowning." That stopped them. Legal counsel tapped the table. "You're suggesting his actions were involuntary." "I'm suggesting context matters," Mara replied. "He was bleeding internally. His adrenaline was spiking. He was disoriented. The giant attacks ER narrative ignores that." The chairwoman folded her hands. "Then answer this. Why were you able to stop him when others failed?" Mara didn't answer immediately. "Because I didn't challenge him," she said finally. "I joined his momentum." The room absorbed that. The chairwoman leaned back. "You used physical force." "Yes," Mara said, "as a last step, not a first." Another board member glanced at the screen. "You didn't hesitate." Mara nodded. "Because hesitation would have gotten someone hurt." The chairwoman studied her. "You've had training beyond standard nursing." Mara hesitated, just for a beat. "I grew up with a brother who had PTSD," she said. "I learned early what panic looks like." No one spoke. "Is he okay?" Mara asked suddenly. Pierce blinked. "Evan Cross?" "Yes." "He's stable," Moreno said. "Recovering." Mara exhaled. The chairwoman turned off the screen. "This board exists to prevent harm," she said. "But harm isn't always loud." She looked around the table. "The question we should be asking isn't whether Nurse Hale used force." Everyone turned back to Mara. "It's why no one else tried to understand him sooner." The room went quiet. Outside, headlines still screamed hospital fight and giant versus nurse. Inside that conference room, for the first time, the story was being told from the inside out. And the truth was finally catching up. Evan Cross had always been loud without meaning to. Even now, confined to an ICU bed, every breath sounded heavier than it should have. Machines clicked softly around him, tracking a body that had finally slowed down. The 7-foot giant stared at the ceiling, hands resting uselessly at his sides, replaying the night over and over. He hadn't meant to scare anyone. A nurse entered quietly, checking vitals. "You've got a visitor." Evan's chest tightened. "Police?" She shook her head. "No, Mara." When Mara stepped in, the room felt smaller, not because of Evan's size, but because of the weight between them. She pulled a chair close, the same way she had before. "They're asking questions," she said gently. Evan snorted weakly. "They always do." "They want your statement." That got his attention. "About what?" "About what really happened." He laughed, then winced. "No one ever wants that." Mara waited. She had learned patience in the ER. Silence often did more than words. "They say I charged the ER," Evan said finally. "Like I wanted to hurt someone." "You didn't," Mara said. "How do you know?" "Because you didn't," she replied simply. "If you had, someone would have been seriously injured." Evan swallowed hard. His eyes burned. "I was trying to stay conscious. Everything felt like it was closing in. People yelling, guns, hands everywhere." His fingers curled into the sheets. "When I'm scared, my body reacts before my brain catches up." Mara nodded. Fight or flight doesn't care how big you are. He turned to her. You weren't scared. I was, she said honestly. I just didn't let you see it. That surprised him. They think you're some kind of superhero now, Evan said, the unexpected hero nurse. Mara smiled faintly. That's not who I am. Then who are you? She considered it. Someone who saw a patient, not a headline. Evan closed his eyes. They've been calling me a monster since I was a kid. Mara's throat tightened. I'm sorry. They say Giant attacks ER like it's the whole truth, he continued. Like I woke up and chose violence. Silence stretched. Will you tell them, he asked, what you saw? Yes, Mara said without hesitation. And if they don't listen? Then I'll keep saying it. Evan let out a shaky breath. You didn't take me down to win. No, she said. I took you down so you wouldn't die. That landed. A doctor appeared at the door. We're ready when you are, Mr. Cross. Evan looked at Mara. Stay, she nodded. In the interview room later, cameras were off, recorders on. No uniforms, just people. Evan spoke slowly, choosing each word. I wasn't attacking, he said. I was losing control because I was bleeding and terrified. Nurse Hale didn't fight me. She stopped the fall. The room went quiet. Outside, the world still argued over clips and captions, but inside that hospital, the giant Vierses. Nurse story was unraveling into something harder and more honest. For the first time, Evan Cross wasn't being spoken about. He was finally being heard. The press conference was scheduled for noon. By 11:30, the hospital lobby was packed. Cameras lined the walls. Reporters whispered, tested microphones, rehearsed questions that had already decided the answers. Outside, a banner headline scrolled across a news van screen. Giant attacks are questions. Raise about use of force. Mara watched from a side hallway, arms folded, jaw tight. This is where they simplify everything, Officer Keller said beside her. Or get it wrong, she replied. Dr. Pierce straightened his tie as he approached the podium. He looked older than he had a week ago. The weight of the institution pressed down on his shoulders. We're here to address the emergency room incident involving Mr. Evan Cross, he began. Questions exploded instantly. Was excessive force used? Is Nurse Hale being disciplined? Why did police fail to control the situation? Pierce raised a hand. We'll address all of that. Then he did something no one expected. I'd like you to hear directly from the patient. A ripple of surprise moved through the room. From a side door, Evan Cross emerged, slowly, carefully, supported by a nurse. He wore a hospital gown, IV pole rolling beside him. Pale, weaker, human. The room went silent. This was not the image from the footage. Not the 7-foot giant frozen mid-lunge. This was a man recovering from surgery. I didn't attack the ER, Evan said, voice rough but steady. I was bleeding internally. I was confused. I was scared. Cameras clicked furiously. I've spent my life being treated like a threat, he continued. That night, fear took over. Nurse Hale didn't fight me. She saved me. A reporter shouted, Did she use force? Yes, Evan said, the right kind. Mara felt her chest tighten. She saw what no one else did, Evan went on, that I was a patient first. Silence followed. Not the tense silence of accusation, but the kind that meant people were listening. Dr. Pierce stepped back to the mic. An internal review found Nurse Hale acted within ethical care standards. No disciplinary action will be taken. A beat, and our protocols will be updated. Gasps, murmurs, heads snapped up. A hand shot up. Are you saying this incident will change hospital policy? Yes, Pierce said, because restraint without understanding is not care. From the back of the room, someone called out, What about the police response? Officer Keller stepped forward. We're reviewing that too, he said. We can do better. The narrative cracked. By the time the conference ended, headlines had shifted. Patient speaks. Nurse saved me. Hospital admits failure, rewrites protocols. Mara slipped away before anyone could stop her. She stood outside, breathing in the cold air, the noise of the city washing over her. For the first time since the ER chaos, the tension in her shoulders eased. Keller joined her. "You changed the story." Mara shook her head. Evan did. Across the street, a screen replayed the clip again, but now the caption was different. Not hospital fight, not giant versus nurse. But when care stepped in, the turning point had come, not through force, but through truth. The days after the press conference were strangely quiet. No cameras in the hallways, no reporters outside the doors. The ER returned to its steady rhythm, stretchers rolling, monitors beeping, lives intersecting for brief, intense moments before moving on. But the people were different. Mara felt it the moment she stepped onto the floor. Conversations softened when tensions rose. Nurses checked in with one another more deliberately. Doctors paused. Just a second. Longer, before labeling a patient difficult. The ER chaos had left a mark. Caleb Finch noticed it too. During a late shift, he watched a large, agitated man argue at the triage desk. The room tensed, the old fear flickering. Then a senior nurse stepped forward, lowered her voice and asked a simple question. "Where does it hurt?" The man exhaled, shoulders dropped, crisis dissolved. Caleb looked at Mara across the room. She gave a small nod. Not proud, not dramatic, just present. In the ICU, Evan Cross continued to recover. Physical therapy was slow. Pain came in waves. But something else had changed. He wasn't invisible anymore. Staff spoke to him, not around him. Doctors explained procedures instead of assuming compliance. Even the police check-ins felt different. Less suspicion, more listening. One afternoon, Mara found him sitting up, staring out the window. "They're letting me go home tomorrow," he said. "That's good," she replied. He hesitated. "They asked if I wanted to file a complaint." "And?" "I said no," he said. "Not because nothing went wrong, but because something finally went right." Mara absorbed that quietly. "They're calling me a symbol now," Evan added with a dry smile. "I never wanted to be one." "No one does," Mara said. "But sometimes stories need a face." He nodded. "Just promise me something." "What's that?" "Don't let them turn this into a myth," he said. "You're not invincible. I wasn't a villain." Mara met his eyes. "I won't." On her next shift, Dr. Pierce stopped her in the hallway. "I wanted you to know," he said. "We're adding de-escalation and physiological panic response to onboarding, starting with new nurses." Mara blinked. "Starting with rookies?" He smiled faintly. "Especially rookies." Later that night, Mara sat alone in the break room, scrolling past old headlines now buried under newer noise. The viral clip had faded. The internet had moved on, as it always did. But in this building something endured. Care had reclaimed ground from fear. As Mara stood to return to the floor, a call came in. Another agitated patient. Raised voices. Familiar tension. She didn't rush, she didn't hesitate. She walked toward it, steady, human, present. Because the real story was never about a 7-foot giant, or a rookie nurse, or who took whom down. It was about what happened after the noise faded, and how, in that quiet, people chose to do better. Months passed. The hospital changed with the seasons. New interns, new equipment, new posters on the walls about de-escalation and trauma awareness. The incident that once dominated every conversation became a case study, then a footnote, then history. But some moments don't fade. Mara discovered that late one night, during a shift that felt almost too quiet. Rain tapped softly against the windows. The ER lights cast long reflections on the floor. She was charting when the triage desk called out. Possible aggressive patient incoming. The words still carried weight. Mara stood automatically, heart quickening, not with fear, but memory. Across the room, staff stiffened, the old reflex rising. The doors opened. The man who entered wasn't 7 feet tall. He wasn't bleeding, but his eyes darted the same way Evans had. His hands shook. His breathing was shallow and fast. Panic. Mara stepped forward. "I've got this," she said calmly. Officer Keller, still on rotation with hospital detail, caught her eye. He nodded and stayed back. Mara approached slowly. "You're safe here," she said. "Tell me what hurts." The man's shoulders sagged as if he'd been holding them up for hours. "My chest," he whispered. "I thought I was dying." Mara guided him to a chair, never rushing, never crowding. The ER watched, but this time they didn't freeze. They followed her lead. Later, as the patient slept peacefully after treatment, Caleb leaned against the counter beside her. "You weren't scared at all," he said. Mara shook her head. "I was." "Then how did you do it?" She considered the question. "Fear doesn't disappear," she said. "You just stop letting it drive." Across the unit, a new nurse observed quietly, eyes wide. "Was that you?" she asked. "The nurse from the video?" Mara smiled gently. "I'm just a nurse." "But you're the one who—" Mara interrupted softly. "I'm the one who stayed." The words lingered. That night, Mara paused outside the ER doors before leaving. She could still picture it. The chaos, the shouting, the moment the giant charged the ER, the split second where everything could have gone wrong. What stayed with her wasn't the fall. It was the choice. The choice to step forward when fear demanded retreat. The choice to see a patient instead of a threat. The choice to care when force seemed easier. Stories loved moments of impact. Headlines thrived on giant versus nurse drama. But real change lived in quieter decisions, repeated over time. Mara turned off the lights in the break room and walked out into the night. The world would forget the clip. The hospital wouldn't. And neither would she. Because the moment that stayed wasn't the one everyone watched. It was the one that taught her who she chose to be every time the doors opened. Years later, the story still surfaced, not in headlines anymore, not in viral clips or breathless commentary, but in classrooms, in training sessions, in quiet conversations between nurses before difficult shifts. They didn't call it the fight. They called it the night care one. Mara Hale stood at the back of a lecture hall, watching a new group of nurses listen as Dr. Moreno spoke. On the screen behind her was a single slide, no video, no freeze frame, just words. De-escalation begins with understanding. Moreno gestured gently. This case changed how we teach emergency care, not because of physical technique, but because of presence. Mara felt a familiar tightening in her chest. Pride, mixed with humility. A student raised a hand. "Is it true she took down a 7-foot guy?" A ripple of laughter followed. Moreno smiled. "She stopped a crisis. There's a difference." After the session, Mara stepped outside into the afternoon light. Her badge was worn now, not a rookie anymore. Experience had softened her edges but sharpened her instincts. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unfamiliar number. "Evan Cross. Just wanted you to know, today I ran my first mile since surgery." Mara smiled. She typed back, "Proud of you. Keep going." She paused, then added, "You did the hard part." Across town, in an ER not unlike the one where it all began, a new nurse faced a raised voice, a tense moment, a familiar crossroads. She remembered her training. She remembered the story. She chose calm. That was how it spread, not as legend, but as practice. The world would always love the idea of strength overpowering strength, of a giant versus nurse moment, of someone being taken down instantly. But that wasn't the truth. What really took him down wasn't force. It wasn't technique. It wasn't size. It was the moment someone refused to treat fear like an enemy. The 7-foot giant didn't fall because he was weak. He fell because he was human, and someone finally met him there. Mara walked toward her car, the hospital behind her glowing in the fading light. Another shift would start soon. Another crisis. Another choice. And every time the doors opened, the lesson remained. Care isn't loud, but it's strong enough to stop a giant. Some stories shock you. Some stories entertain you. But once in a while, a story stays with you because it reminds you what strength really looks like. Tonight wasn't just about a 7-foot giant. It wasn't about a rookie nurse. And it definitely wasn't about who was taken down. It was about what happens when fear meets care and care refuses to step back. If this story made you pause, if it made you feel something, if it reminded you that real heroes don't always wear capes, subscribe now. Because here, we tell the stories that don't just go viral. They go deeper. Stories of courage where no one was looking. Moments where calm changed everything. And people who chose compassion when chaos took over. Tap subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay with us, because the next story might change the way you see the world.